Hi everyone, welcome to our first group discussion on code review and code quality. I guess everybody will be always focusing about the frameworks and what code they should write, but never really talk about like how should we write the code and what should be the process of it and how do we develop our skills so that we can understand the code better by just visually seeing it. So let's first talk about the code quality. So for me, the code quality is like delivering a good software application which helps which actually solves the problem, not just in terms of the UX, but in terms of the developer experience as well. Like many times we ship a code which is uh, functionality wise it is working fine, but it's very hard to understand or read or do a knowledge transfer to some other developer who is very new to the coding world. So uh, about the code quality, like generally it impacts the businesses also. Like sometimes we write a code which is like, let's say, a loop inside loop, which we never know that while during the development we will never know what will be its impact. But when it goes to the production, that time it can shoot when the users are, let's say, 10 users. When you do the development, that time the users might be 10 or 100, but when it goes to the production, that time the users can be millions, and that two for loops can really impact the overall performance of your product. The one of the benefits, like what I have seen over the past few years while coding, is like the more early you find the defects or the more early you do this code quality checks or the code review processes, the better your software becomes, and it minimizes the overall impact of it. Like in the initial requirement phase or the during the development phase, if there is a continuous quality check in place, like QA people are there to see the overall application performance, but there should be also a process where the developers can understand the code of the other people, what is going on, and everybody should take participate in it. Like most of the time, I guess people usually focus on their own task, not really think or not really discuss about what the other person is doing or why the other person is writing this kind of code or that kind of code. So, what do you think about Sanket? Like, what processes you follow in while developing a product like a Builder X to
Yeah.
maintain the code quality and readability?
So, first couple of books that's recommended for everyone to read, and it's a must, is the Clean Code book and Clean Architecture.
Yeah,
Go ahead and follow all the practices in those two books. It talks about almost everything. Clean Code talks more specifically about how you should code, and right from like naming variables to naming functions to the number of arguments a function should have, and a bunch of other things which is mandatory for low level coding. And clean architecture is a little advanced version of the same thing, which is recommended for anyone who is architecting things. So it talks about different principles, what you should have in the code. Like the most basic principle that any architect should know is the solid principle, right? Solid
yeah,
principle, like you should have single responsibility. And I really like the second one of solid principle, which talks about open and close. Uh,
yeah,
the software must be open for future add-ons, but the existing code should not be edited. Once you write it, to add a new feature, you should not ever edit the existing code, or the addition like editing should be as minimal as possible. So that brings us to maybe something like a plugin architecture or extension based architecture or layered approach. So make sure like those things are followed really well in like bigger architecture sort of thing. At the
hmm,
lowest level on the code side, I think uh, basic things like naming the variable correct, making sure that the variable name is only for that function. It does not reflect, say, like if I'm writing a module in BuilderX, so the word BuilderX shouldn't be the variable name anywhere, because in future the name of the product can change, right? So it should be related to the function what I'm writing. And there's also one more thing what people do is that long function names and short variable names. This is followed at Facebook, which is really nice. So the file names and the function names can be really long.
Okay.
And it makes it easy to search. And like if you have a function like 10-15 lines of code, a function has, in that it doesn't really make sense to have like really long variable names, right? So those things are mandatory. And yeah, that's code quality. I think when we talk about code review, I have a bunch of other things. So the pointer for everyone is go ahead and read clean code and clean architecture book one after the other. That's mandatory for everyone, and it has all the things what I want to say.
Okay, and talking about the principle, like we can also implement a very basic principle is drive, like do not repeat the code. Like I have seen in the past, like people tend to copy paste a small, they let's say just input element. They're trying to repeat the same code again and again, repeat themselves over the whole application, which becomes very tedious. Like when we have to modify a simple functionality, let's say instead of input, I want to give us something span. Then everywhere I have to replace change those things, those kind of code. So the basic principle one should also follow is the don't repeat your code. Try to create modular codes, reusable things like as much as you can. Even small, even date formatting thing is a very small thing. I can use a simple function to format a particular kind of date format, right? Instead of inlining those things. So and another thing which I have come across is the KISS principle, like keep it simple. So what happens is like people generally try to complicate lot of things inside one function. Like let's say your filter function is there or sorting function is there. So people trying to write a one function where they are doing sorting and filtering. But I guess they should separate these two things because, as Sanket said, a solid principle. One function should perform only one response. So if you should have one function to do a filtration and another function to do a sorting. You should never merge those two things into one function and make it very complicated and unreadable.
So in clean code, there was this question. What is the number of argument that a function should have, an ideal function should have?
I think it can be one argument. Like in an object format, I can accept many things. Like it should not be more than 3 or 4, because it's the function definition.
The book was a function should have 0 arguments. That's the best function. And as you add the number of arguments, and also like if you pass in objects with like optional properties, it's the same thing, right? It's not a different thing. It's like number of properties in an object which is received as at the first parameter is the same thing. So people usually mix this, and this is the source of bugs in my experience, is that we, as you mentioned, like we try to do more than one thing at where we should be doing just one particular specific thing, right? And when we have feature addition or changes going on, then we try not to refactor that in a separate layer, but we go back to the same function. Okay, we have to add something here, so we try to modify the same function. If we are doing that, then that's the source of bug, right? So let's try to like just have one function responsible for just one thing.
Yeah, and on that, I can give a simple example. Like, let's say a button component. Usually, what happens, like people create a simple login button where initially the spinner part is different, the UI part is different. Then the manager will come and say, like, I need a spinner also. So they tend to add the spinner functionality inside the button component, which complicates the thing. But ideally, the spinner part should be different and button should be different. And then there should be a wrapper around this, which should accept the props, and that it should then integrate those two independent components. Something like this one should follow, I guess.
Yeah, so like separating the presentation layer and the logic part.
Correct.
If we do that, then the presentation layer can be used somewhere else, right? And that's why like the modern practices of building software is to build the design system first, so that you don't revisit the same basic or low level design when you are actually building or integrating, say, a bunch of components to build a screen, right? So in such cases, you shouldn't go back to, okay, we need more rounded corner, or we need this color or that color. So that's what we do these days, that build the design system first, keep it in a separate repo, or maybe in the form of monorepo. You can have it in one of the
Mm-hmm.
repos in monorepo, and then use it in different project altogether. Right?
Yeah,
So
but design system is basically creating your own UI library for a project, right?
yes,
But that usually takes a lot of time to build, right? But it's good for the long term project, I guess.
I'm working with Shivraj to give you a base level design system which would work on React and React Native both,
Okay.
and we would like to use it as like the base design system that any project should have. We have seen that in many good projects wherever we have worked in team augmentation model with other companies. We
Mm-hmm.
have seen these practices coming in from really good companies,
Mm-hmm.
and also on Twitter, if you follow Siddharth Kshetrapal and other
Yeah.
guys, so they build design system, and that's the way to go. It's future proof. It's good for bigger projects, but if we try to use it from day one in a smaller projects, then that would really help in the long run. And that's why me and Shivraj are working on building the base design system, which anyone can start using on their
Okay.
projects. Yeah.
Okay. And the design system can have smallest component like a flex component. It can have. It did not necessary to be have a select drop down or something. They can even have a small component like a flex, which just do a responsibility of having a providing a display as flex.
Yeah, so we are trying to split the design system into two parts. One is primitive components, and then is second is composite components.
Mm-hmm.
Primitives will have all those low level things, while having the restrictions of spacing, margin, and colors and all those things. And composite will have like a bunch of reusable complex components like drop down and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
I really love how React Aria and the Adobe team have like pulled out the interaction, keyboard accessibility, and all those things in hooks, so that it would be really easy for us to build design systems going forward.
Yes. Recently they have launched this platform, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Devon has been working from a really long time. The guy
Okay.
behind Parser, yes.
Okay. Okay. And coming back to the our topic like code quality, like one of the another parameter which I judge the code quality is using test cases, like TDD approach, which we call like test driven. I guess is the best way to met. We have the statistics there, like how many test cases are fail. Even if we do the refactoring or do modification, right? If test cases are there, then we'll know that the functionality is working or not. So in TDD, what challenges what I have faced so far is like it takes a lot of time to write the test cases to test each and every functionality of the application, right? So so how do you look at the TDD approach? Like it, you think it is an overhead or it's a blessing?
Who has added TDD? I think Saurav, Amit.
No, yet to start in the plan.
But do you guys build like whenever you develop an application, you guys focus on writing a test case and then writing the functionality, or you first build the functionality and then write the test cases? Like what's the
It's the
criteria?
other. Right now, what we have done is like writing the functionality first and then writing the test cases for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so in that approach, like you write down all the use cases, all the unit test cases, or you tend to do the integration testing as well, like.
No, have the unit test cases first. Then,
Okay.
yeah.
And all the edge cases are covered in the in those unit test
Right,
cases.
right, right.
And one of the like I was doing a refactoring of one of my projects, like old project. So first thing what I did is like I have written all the test cases first, because I don't want to break the existing functionality, and there's no other way except to write the test cases and to run against it, my new code, right? So I really love the TDD approach, but the drawback which I feel is that only the time taking. Like even if the feature or the functionality are changing on regular basis, because we generally do the agile development process, right? So in agile development, like features keep changing, like so it becomes very difficult with the TDD approach.
So we do test applications, right? Like the most trivial test is like hitting the refresh button, right? That's the most basic test case that we do, right? That's human-based test casing case, right? TDD is a bit advanced form of that. So that brings me to what is your development in terms of when you are asked to develop a feature, and when we break that down into, say, multiple components or smaller modules. So is that module developed in isolation, or is that always like with the application user flow? Like, okay, this would fall in step 3 where user would fill this form and then we check and then submit the form. Is it always there, or do we develop, say, like if I have to build a form, so I build that form somewhere else and then give the props to the main application integrator or someone, then that person integrates. So even if we are doing it in 2 or 3 different steps, those different layers become like different test environments, or development environments itself becomes test environments, right? So I have a question for all you guys. Like, how do you, what is the working style these days in your projects?
It's a kind of mix. Like, it depends. Like, if I know that package, the feature which I'm developing has nothing to do with my application, like that feature I can use in multiple places easily, then I try to develop in isolation. But sometimes there are features which has to be a part or mix, like integrated, complex, like tightly coupled. So those features, I think I have to consider the other application part and then develop it. Because sometimes I have to, like recently I was developing a Google Map clustering thing where I have to render like 20,000 markers on the map. So I had to consider performance there, and that at that time I have to tightly couple some of the things so that the performance is not hit by even if there's 20,000 or 5,000 markers are rendered on the Google Map. But initially I developed those markers independently, and then when I thought, like when the client demanded, okay, no, I have to render 20,000 markers, then the tightly close coupled system I have to build at the time.
So when you built the maps and the markers, and you had to integrate it in your parent application, did you copy the code or did you consume it as an npm package?
Right now, I have written the code in a way it can anytime be converted into npm package. But right now it's not published because it's under the client repository itself. But yeah, I have written in such a way that any day if I move the complete folder into an npm package, it can be easily be done, because it just accepts it runs on the props. It doesn't require anything else.
Okay, makes sense. Amit, how about you guys? Raja, Amit, anyone of you?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
Yeah, like what is the development strategy that we are following in projects these days? It's like, if there's something decoupled, are we like building an npm package separately and then using that npm package, or like it's isolated sandbox environment in the parent application itself, like we create a test controller or test route and build everything there and then integrate it, or is it always right inside the application on this specific route, directly right there?
No. We in the last 2 projects we've created packages, but we haven't published it. But anywhere we see something, okay, this can be reused, we usually just make it into a package and keep it separately there. But the thing is, we never get the time to actually publish it.
Okay.
The thing which you're telling, I have also used in one more project where we have published multiple things. Like we develop a widget, develop a dashboard where we can drag and drop the widgets, right? So in that application, we have the npm package for UI UX component, as you told, that design system, and then we have packages for the events to capture those, to handle every kind of events. We have a separate library itself. Then we have widgets. So those widgets are again standalone. Every widget is considered as an individual npm package. And then we have a separate dashboard where we integrate all these individual npm packages and use them. So this kind of approach is good when we have, like, we know the clear picture and clear boundaries there. But in most of the client project, we don't get the clear boundary. So
right. Okay. So to give you an idea, right now we have 24 repos with BuilderX, 24 repos. Okay, and each one of them is separate and separate npm package sort of thing. I think we have like 10-12 npm packages. Few of them are for like websites and things like that. And inside the main BuilderX component, we have I think 25. It's like a mono repo. One of the main repos is a mono repo, which has 25 repos inside that, 25 to 30 folders inside that. And then we have a plugin system. We have written about 20-25 plugins inside that. So it's like 75 different folders, and those can be developed in isolation. Like each folder, you can just do npm start and start building things on that, right? This way, it's really easy for us to build anything. Like recently, Sumant built a Flutter integration, and he didn't have to. We have our BuilderX framework, in which you can boot up plugins, and that plugin can be built using TSDX. And now it's really simple. Like Flutter plugin is a separate repo. Anyone can come in and then see what Sumant has built and modify it on top of it without worrying about the internals of BuilderX, how this is being used, what is the data inside that, or something like that, right? So TSDX has helped a lot in the past 6 months. Like it used to be, BuilderX used to be like 3 repos with no plugins at all. We have over the time, like we have split it into like 60-65 independent folders, which can be run on their own, right? So this approaches like this it really helps you like to scale up the application. We have used React's props at many places, but we were more based on mutability. So we had to build our own event system, a global event system. Each plugin gets a prefix of the event, and then you can split it with dot, and then it can emit any particular event, and it can be used by any particular plugin which is loaded, right? So React's prop, if you are using functional programming, then it becomes really easy to just pass props and start consuming it. Like recently in apibeats.com, we built the share dialog. That share dialog is hosted under Geekians. That's a ready to use NPM library for anyone. Just install it. It gives you a component, and you can turn it on and off, and it has all those different blocks of sharing, like share with team and things like that. It's highly customizable, right? So if we follow that approach, then probably we can also like build our own internal npm directory sort of thing, wherein we can start like consuming things across teams,
multiple
right?
projects.
Yeah, multiple projects.
Yeah.
So
And the
yeah,
the main concern in here, like main thing in here is that the suppression of concern, like the one package should not interfere with the other, right? And there should be clear requirements. Initially, we should have an agreement between different packages. Then only this system work on a large scale. Because in the past, when I was developing this dashboard kind of thing, the things are getting mixed up. But slowly we separate out the things, and we make sure that this component or this npm package does only one particular stuff. It doesn't require, if you want to modify, then clone it and then do your stuff. But we don't allow that into the package itself to do.
Right, makes sense. So a clear agreement of like types really helps. If you like expose the interface so that you get the correct props between the systems.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, and let's move on to next topics. Is like when we talk about the code quality, like generally we can enforce using I think the tools which I mostly use to enforce some of the code quality is like Prettier and the Husky. Like those are like basic formatting of the code structuring, and Husky gives you a pre-commit hooks which you can run anytime, like before committing or before pushing to the code. So those kind of help me a lot. Like any junior developer cannot push anything to the repo unless they clear all the ESLint bugs or the Prettier things. What other tools you guys use across your application?
I use a tool which comes with GitLab and GitHub. It's called merge request and pull requests. It helps a lot.
Yeah, that's the next part of our code review section.
Yeah, I think we use Husky, and TDD also helps. Like when you are building Or a storybook also helps for component testing, snapshot testing, and yeah, TDD with Jest works well. But in practice, I think storybook or anything like that works really well for me. I think others can add in their points.
And anybody is using TDD approach in any of the projects or a storybook? I guess not. Everybody's
Storybook we are using everywhere, so that's very helpful tool. Storybook, like we can have the components completed separately. We know all the props, what needs to be passed in, so that's a good thing to have.
Okay. And another thing which I think like everybody should have a editor config in their application as well. Like most of the people have their own VS Code setting or Prettier setting, right? And which is kind of difficult. Like when you raise a PR at the time you have done only one changes, but when you do control save, then there's lot of code formatting happening. So I guess the code editor's config should be there in every project. Like it should be mandatory kind of thing.
So I would suggest use default Prettier. It works really well.
Yeah,
Don't-
but
yeah.
But Prettier has, everybody has their own setting. Right? If you have a config file itself in the project, like a Prettier RC file, so that at least everybody will have same rule engine.
Delete the RC file. Stick to the default ones.
Okay.
You know what? Prettier launched with no config, and later people pushed a lot to the creators that we want some config, and then they added, and it went back to the same thing. Right? The problem what it had to solve, now it's creating the same problem. If we have a configuration file for Prettier, I wouldn't recommend like changing anything in there. At least when you're working on within teams, if you're the sole developer, you want to do whatever you want to do, then go ahead and do some crazy ESLint and Prettier config in there.
Okay. So you follow 2 tab or 4 tab? Like general discussion, like most of the happens this 2 tab or 4 tab of arguments happening across the community.
I think the default one is it's 4, I guess. I'm not sure. I'm just using the default configuration. I've not changed it. I would focus on the product instead.
But the readability also matters, right? At the end.
Yeah. So if you just use, you can change the visual aspect of it. Like the file saving would happen in the same way. Like /t, you can configure it like 4 or 2. That's like in your personal VS Code configuration. Prettier would take it as just /t.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. For me, it's 4 spaces. Like /t means 4 spaces right now.
Okay. I think I also use four spaces, like 4. So it's neat and clean at least for me. Okay. And
what does React use? Like what is there in the React's main repo? Do they use 2 spaces?
never checked.
Let me check.
Yeah.
I think you guys can move on with the discussion. I'll just check.
Okay. Another topic which comes in, like I think this is your philosophy only, like move fast and break things, right? So speed versus quality. So many times, like there is a deadline, like you have to write, like ship the code so that at least the end users can start using and give the feedback. But that has pros and cons as well. Like pros are like you are shipping early, it's fast, and at least you get the real feedback which customer is using. But the but the cons are like sometimes it can be messy and it's very difficult. Like a small bug can happen which can crash your application miserably. So what do you think? Speed versus quality?
I have no comments.
Saurabh?
I would choose quality always.
But when there's a client deadline, you will push for speed.
Yeah.
It's always
Well,
the argument, right?
yeah, really. One thing is like what we usually miss is like we should code like it is going to fail. No, that nobody's. We always go for a happy flow that is working, and yeah, अपने के system पे तो चल रहा है वाला scene. Yeah. We should code like it is going to fail. then
Yeah.
we should cover all this.
But at least I think even if you're writing fast, but at least you should have a proper try catch things in
Right.
place, so that even if there's an error, you can at least catch it later and then debug it and put error logging library like Sentry where you can keep track of those logs. But yeah, I also prefer like ship the thing and then let's see what happens. That's move fast break thing.
It depends on what you're building and like what level of experiments is going on in that project, right? So I think people use push to master, release on production, then we'll debug through Sentry. I don't think that's a good approach. As Saurav said, I think we should follow the same thing. Is that code as if it's going to fail, like on different devices, different screen sizes, and then you'll empathize with the end users. Okay, my end user can be blind. My end user maybe doesn't know English, or anything in particular, right? So coming back to move fast and break things, it depends like where and when, right? If I'm in a hackathon, I would definitely move fast and break things and just want to ship it and win the hackathon, right? But when I'm on a large scale project, I would like properly go ahead and build every layer and then integrate it, test it, like build a design system, build a proper architecture, make sure everything is built, everything is and know where we have like colon any in there, right? If we have enough time. So, but we have to make a choice, and that really depends on the requirements, right? Like how much time does the client have? How much are we going to reuse? Things like that.
So maybe we can take this up to like invest initial time in the architecting the things, like put lot of efforts into gathering all the requirements and architecting your application, and then move fast. Like just then develop according to your architecture which is decided. Then during the development, don't change anything. Maybe this approach can help.
Yeah, like we have worked on a lot of projects, right? I think we should have a proper like base repo from where we should start projects, and we should have a bunch of predefined rules that should be carried from projects to projects, right? And if we don't have that, then we should ask the client, like, what is your goal? Do you want to like launch first and test with like 1,000 users and then come back, and like what is the current stage of the product? And from there we should derive like which part do we want to take.
Yeah,
engineering is good. Over engineering can really hamper the speed of development and the motivation of the project as well. But it can be mandatory as well for like long-term and big projects.
So it basically boils down to like the product owner what they want, like because I give you a simple example. Like recently, the Ludo application, right, which during this COVID has shoot up lots of millions of users, right? So if they have not architected their application in such a scale manner, then it would have crashed and people would have not used it, right? So sometimes the quality also matters. To have a like unexpectedly it happened, right? Nobody was expecting like Ludo to shoot up so many millions of users in few months.
Right. I think they rewrote their application like twice or thrice. The initial version, even before the lockdown happened, I think they were ready for that. I mean, they had 1 million of users, but even before that, they had like a couple of versions which was like really not good, and they rebuilt a lot of things. And many big projects also do the same thing, like say Google Sheets or all these things. Like they had a like previous version which was not really scalable, and then they improved. So that's also an option. Depends on what we're looking for.
Yeah,
And,
that's true.
yeah. Meanwhile, Mukul was sipping vodka, I guess. Anyway,
That's the perk of having work from home.
It's water.
Okay.
Anyway,
Moving
yeah.
on. Now comes the code review part. Like, how many projects like have a strict rule, like without reviewing any PR, nothing should merge into the master or development? Like everybody is following it, or just few projects?
Raise your hands.
Few of them, okay. I guess this is one of the most important aspects of any project development cycle, like the code review part, because with code review you get to know other process thinking ability and what logic they are building and what things they are approaching, what approaches they are doing to solve a particular problem, right? So it's really important to have a healthy discussions during the code review section. I really kind of avoid things like forcing my opinion. I just have a healthy discussion around it. Like I always try to avoid the like forcing of the thing. Like you have to write this particular thing like in this manner only. It's always good to have opinions of different developers and then discuss it, which is better approach for the product rather than just thinking about yourself.
I think since we went remote from like past 3-4 months, I have been reviewing a lot of code. I have learned a lot of things about the thought process of my team members, and they have also learned. And remote working has really helped in like getting the correct PRs merged, screen sharing, and all those things.
Yeah, and also like when you do the discussion, you come up with new ideas also sometimes. Like why I have written like this, it should be written like in the maybe say XYZ manner, and that was more performant, which generally doesn't come when you are developing a problem, because you will during the development you will be thinking only in one direction, and during this discussion, lot of new ideas come across and which you can share among the team.
Right.
And also one of the benefit of code review is like there's no buzz factor. Like buzz factor is like if one person is not there, then the whole feature is down or nobody can touch their code. So if we have this healthy discussion across the team, so everybody will be knowing what's going around the application, and when they develop the code, they will keep the other part of the application in their mind rather than just focusing on one particular feature, one particular segment of the application.
Yes. Yeah.
But drawbacks of code review, sometimes I feel like it takes a lot of development time. Like if you don't have a team lead, and if only one person is there to review like thousands of lines of code, then it takes a lot of time. So how do you deal such situations? Like have you come across first of all such situations or not?
This GD is turning out to be an interview, so I'm not going to answer.
Okay, but somebody can answer. Anyone? Like, okay, I'll give a simple question. Like, is everybody does the code review of every other person in your team, or only the team leads has to do this code review thing? Like, what is your opinion in this aspect? Anyone?
Team lead should do that.
Team lead.
Yeah.
And what about the code of team lead? Who reviews team lead's code?
I think everyone should do it, like vice versa, so that they will know about the code, the way of coding the team lead writes or your senior writes, and how you write, so you can match up to that.
Yeah, I'll also agree with Suman. Like every team member should do the review thing, because first of all, you will get to know what the other person is writing and how they are writing. Because by reading only, you come to know the other ideas, right? If you don't read the code, or if you don't involve in other, if you don't read GitHub repository, right? So you will never come to know, okay, I can write this particular feature. Let's say a pagination feature can be written in multiple ways. So I guess when you do the code review, you get these small ideas through it, and that's the best way to learn for me. Like I've been doing code review, and it has helped me a lot, because I get to know a lot of approaches, not just one set of mine which I have, but hundreds of people are working, so I get to know all their approaches. In BuilderX team, I guess everybody is doing their own code review, or you do, or Sanket, you only do.
It's a mix. I trust. I mean, after a lot of like spending a lot of time with a lot of people, so I have few of them like junior developers under like say 1.5 years. We get their code reviews for sure. Like anyone beyond that, like 1.5-2 years. Once I have certain level of trust, then they can merge their code as well. But over time, I keep reviewing here and there. But under 1 year, I think it's mandatory to review the code line by line, including semicolon, tabs, variable names, function names, everything. That's mandatory because that's a lot of learning, and I have realized it very late, to be honest. And after a certain level, you can do more of like design things in terms of, okay, this is the class name, this is the function name, do this. Then after an year, like a year of experience or 1.5 years of experience, you can be okay, like I'll just review the code name, class name and function name and how it is being called. Inside that, whatever you want to do, I trust that it would be good. Right? So that's the strategy what we have been following.
And also one more strategy which I have recently come across is like I should document the things. Like I should document how the PR structure should be, like the folder name conversion, the file name, folder name, and what things I need in a particular project. Like what the agreement should be there between among the team before starting the development process. So that's the one thing which I am working on, so that I can share that document and everybody can read and understand, and they can give their own opinion. So that later on when we do the code review, there is no blame game, like you told me like this or you told me like that. Why you are asking now?
Yeah, I think it's also a team level agreement. Like if we are working on with the same set of people on multiple projects, so you develop that over time, and that's how you set the culture right. It can also be like you set a lot of rules, and then at the end of the day, people stop thinking about the use case and about a lot of things, how the code is going to be used, and they just focus on, okay, just variable names. I'm going to spend like 30 minutes on the correct variable name. Right? That should not be the case, right? At the end of the day, people should also empathize enough, like why they are building it. So it's a balance, I would say, and the culture develops over time. If the culture is set right, you forget about the rules slowly because people have absorbed that thing.
Yeah, it becomes a habit eventually.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and initially it takes time, like to just grasp those new things, but later on it becomes your habit, and you tend to write in the same way. And even you can argue with other people why you are writing not like this. Like I have come across many people in my team, like we follow a utility function. Like every small function has to be in the util folder. Like if somebody by mistakenly write in the component level, why you are writing like this, like they cross question and then they share the ideas. So that's a good way to improve the culture and to be more collaborative. And another benefit which I feel like the team itself become self-independently slowly. Like you don't need even a team lead after a certain point, because the team knows what to write and how to write the code. But for the team lead, I think they should focus more on the design and the architecture side of the code review, and among the team they should discuss what should be the naming convention and what should be the performance. Is it whether it is performant or not? But the team lead must focus more on the overall architecture of the application when he is doing the code review, because he must be the guy who has more ideas.
Right. So 2 different levels, I would say, like code and architecture, like 2 different things, and both needs to be correct or have an agreement on that.
Correct. And another thing with when doing the code review, I would prefer like the small PRs, like instead of having a one complete big feature where it has tons of lines of code, but I would prefer like it has max to max 200 or 300 of lines, so that at least it's easy to understand.
Right. Yes.
Okay. And the disadvantage is like another thing which I have felt recently is like you should not wait for the person, or you should keep giving the feedback as quickly as possible, right, during the code review. Like if somebody is busy, then the team lead should definitely take out some time to review the things rather than pending it for a day or so, because that has hampered a lot in my experience, because the other person doesn't know where that code can impact, and they just keep writing more and more code over the top of that ugly code. So it's very necessary that we give a fast feedback to the junior people so that they can adopt early as quickly as possible.
And even the like junior devs should give a proper analogy to the senior devs, like why this, and probably the junior devs can be right, and it can be a valid question from the senior as well, right? So proper analogy is also required. Yeah.
And even in the PR, I am trying to add a description. Like generally, we raise a PR and just leave it, and we have to track. Okay, for which card in the Trello the PR was created, right? So maybe a good way is to write a description about what things you have developed in your PR, the feature which you have developed, right? So that helps the developer, and also for the other team member who is not in constant touch, maybe he can read the description and then understand from the third party point of view.
Yes. Yeah.
And is there any automation tool which is there in the community which people uses for the code review thing? Does anybody knows?
Trello has a GitHub extension that automatically attaches the card. Like you need to just attach the pull request on the Trello board itself, and it will add a comment relating that card on the GitHub.
Okay. Same like how the Atlassian suite is there, like a Jira board and the Bitbuckets are both linked together. In the same way.
Something like that. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So that's a good way to develop the things, right? Because at the end you get everything in one commit. And another question which I wanted to ask, like, do you follow this pattern, like writing a card number in the commit message, or it should not be followed? Because commit message is one of the things which people tend to miss out, but that is also part of this code review and code quality thing. So do you focus on those kind of stuffs also?
I don't use Jira and Bitbucket much. So, but it has a really nice integration. Like if you type fixes space the number of the card, that card automatically moves to done. So those things are great, but I haven't personally used. I used it like a long time ago, but not recently.
Okay. And what about the commit messages? Like, do you enforce your team to write in a particular format or some? Because recently I have come across one client where he was very peculiar about the commit message, even the language what you are using in there. So does anybody have any such experience in the coding world?
Git commit -a, I'm done for the day.
I know who has written that commit message.
But I think it's good to be particular on the commit messages as well. I think Alec on DevLabMe was enforcing these things really well, right? I think Saurabh can share a bit about that.
Yeah. So what we were following is having the Jira card number, and if there are any fixes, it should go via a prefix fix _ what have you fixed, then a proper message. If it's a feature, then we keep the message as feature, and having the branches name also helps. Like the branches can be named via fix / the fix what you're doing, or feature / things like that. So that helps a lot in tracking, and it increases the readability.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think small commit messages are also helpful, right? Rather than committing the whole feature into one commit, like done login page or integrate. It would be grateful if you added an input box and then added a styling to it and then did the validation part, something like this, so that small commit message really help us to understand and even to debug later on.
So what is the ideal number of commits per day?
There is no ideal number, but it should be more specific to feature which you are developing. Because somebody can even write a commit message, I removed a console log and then added a console log.
Yeah, frequent commits is better to have, like having smaller commits and frequent commits, even on a single feature. That helps in the review process and merging it and keeping the branch updated.
And it's more clean approach which I can think of.
I think just one commit per day is not good. I think we definitely need more. I wouldn't throw a number, but more commits, it's always better. But stable commit is also important.
Yeah,
broken commit is not good. And in PR we have like branches, so like one branch can go for like days, or maybe like one day or a couple of days. It should have a lot of commits, because that keeps you in sync with the main branch, and also gives a proper visibility of like what were the like minor fixes here, there, or anything like that. Descriptive, it's good to have like descriptive commit messages, and frequency would be great. Like small things, 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 2 hours, depends. It can be even like one entire day if you are stuck on something like which is not moving and you're trying to fix that. So we can't really give a number, but like 3-4 commits per day. If you're going smooth and well, sailing well, then it's good.
Maybe we can have logical commits. Like if you have completed one logical part of your feature, then you can just commit it and then push it. So
right.
And in terms of like branching system, like I follow a pattern where we have development, master development, and then feature and bug fixes and hot fixes. Like these are the three main category which I distribute my branches. So what other kind of branching system you follow?
I think most of the people are using Gitflow, right?
Yeah, but Gitflow in a sense, like you have the master development, everybody raises against the development branch, right? All the feature branches, and then developer is merged to the master.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, but does they even break down your, like let's say a feature is very big and they break down those feature branch to sub branches, or you don't enforces those things?
We like in my project we enforce a lot in terms of nothing goes on master. Everything is developed in their feature branches only, and if it is an immediate small feature which is to be merged, which has to be live in the sprint, it goes on development. If it's a major refactor which is going to like take a couple of weeks, then we take out another like sub feature branches from the main feature branch, and then that is merged to the like feature branch, and then feature branch is sent on the development. There's no direct commit in my projects. There's no direct commits on development and master. I take most of the control of like, it depends, like Suraj, Himanshu, Ankur are taking care of BuilderX main repo, but API Beats, I'm taking control of like development and master branches.
Yeah, and this control we can easily do with the Bitbucket and GitHub, where you have a protected branch system, like who can and provide different roles to different developers, and only a particular role can merge those things. So it really helps me a lot.
Yeah, I think it should be mandatory for every project.
Yeah.
We should document these somewhere on Notion or somewhere and have this.
I think it's documented. Just follow Gitflow. That's it. Gitflow has all the rules set there. So maybe if we are doing that, I'm doing that. Maybe everybody has their own approach.
I generally ask them, like, explain. If you're a junior dev, first of all I explain what is Gitflow, and then ask them to read about Gitflow documentation, so it helps them better understand. So and talking about like one of the things which over the years I have experienced is like how to deal with the technical debt. Like because during the code review you won't know that this will be a technical debt now or in the future, right? So you will be thinking, okay, this for loops is fine for the current feature, but in the future it can become a technical debt. So when do we handle this kind of stuff, and how do we deal with it?
There was a joke going on Twitter about technical debts and how to solve technical debts. The answer was change your job.
But we can't.
Just kidding. Don't do that. Anyway, I would like to hear from other people, like how are they dealing with technical debts? Something which has been there, something that goes to backlog stays in backlog forever, right?
Yeah,
it's like
forever. Yeah, it never comes out of that.
Yeah. So, but still, like, how do we deal with technical debts? Do you guys suggest the clients that, okay, there is a refactor that is needed and we need couple of weeks of time that you need to pay for, right? So yeah. How does that conversation go?
So one of the approaches which I have followed in the past is like I mostly write a comment, inline comments or to-do kind of thing. Like I have to remove this part of code or this part of ugly code in future, and it can be a technical debt. And then once a feature is released, then we generally ask client to give us some time to refactor the thing, restructure our project, so that later on we don't have too much of technical and we don't have to refactor too much. So we tend to divide a phases. Like we have small phases or chunk of code which we think, okay, this part needs refactoring now because it can impact the performance, or it is impacting the development experience also. So maybe we can divide into phases and then ask the client to give us some time to work on it.
So how do you convince the clients? Okay, this is something that they need to pay for, something what we have created, right? The problem that we have created for them, they need to pay for that. Like,
so one of the approaches is like, first of all, they keep changing the requirements. So it's easy for me to just ask them that since the requirements has changed, and all the requirements were not there in the initial phase, right? So
yeah,
we have to.
when they change something really early on or quite frequently, do you guys raise a flag? Okay, we are changing this, might create some issues. I'm writing this as a refactor later, so that when next time you have to request the client for 2 weeks of refactor, you raise these concerns. Okay, I had raised a flag about this, and now we need to have that refactor round, right?
Yes, that's kind of approach, because also the client needs to be a little bit technical. If he is purely on the product owner and he doesn't care about the technical, and he just sees visually, he sees the things like, okay, for me the theming is working fine, I don't care about how the theming is implemented. At those times it's a bit difficult to make him understand, like later on it can become more messy what it is right now. So, but if the client is little bit technical and he understands and he loves his product, like he wants his product to be efficient and performant and scalable, then that client will not will not hesitate to even think about spending few more bucks of dollars, because later on he might have to rewrite the complete application, and which can cost millions. So that's the way I try to approach the client and convince them.
Makes sense, yeah.
So you guys, anything to ask about the things about code review and quality? Because we are running out of time. So code quality or code review thing or anything regarding the development cycle. Nobody. It was more between you, me, Mukul, and Saurabh who have participated.
Gaurav, I just want to don't want to ask something. I just want to tell we should also do the code review of our own PRs also before sending someone else, so that we can check our own code quality, that what we have written there, and also all these things. Because sometimes when coding, it is something else on our mind, and when doing our own code review, there's something else.
Yeah, the self-analysis one should do.
Yeah, that helps. Like in the PR, you can see whatever things is going into the development. So that really helps. But don't merge it yourself.
Yeah.
The team lead should make sure that the merging access is only with the team lead or some senior people.
What is that meme? Obama giving a medal to Obama himself. Anyway, I think time's up. Gaurav, you want to? Yeah.
Maybe anybody wants to ask any questions, Sahil or the junior devs who have recently joined the organization and want to know the development cycle or anything?
Gaurav, is using emoji in comment PR is right or not?
That depends upon your team lead. If he is cool, then it's fine, I guess. Do you use emojis?
No, but my text messages are not right, so I was thinking, why not use emoji instead of?
I've seen variable names as emojis as variable names.
Hi, I had a question in React Native and React. I think there are many projects. So can we have something common, some common standard which we should follow, like code practices?
You are talking about in terms of the folder structure and the pattern which we generally follow for the React and React Native project?
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah. For that, I think we have set up some boilerplate code, and we generally follow those MVC kind of design patterns where we have different layer for the service, and we have different layer for the for Redux sagas and Redux or any of the state management library, and we have a presentation layer which only deals with the UI stuff. So these kind of boilerplates I have, maybe I can share with you, and mostly I use those boilerplates only when we kick off any new project.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? I guess then we can end the session. I hope it was helpful session for everybody.
Thanks a lot, Gaurav, for leading this. Yeah, it was really nice.
I learned a couple of new approaches.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. Yeah, it was very informative.
Yeah.
All right, see you. Bye bye.
All right.
Thank
Bye, guys.
you. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Be safe.